How you doing? Is that Utah?
Yeah, it's me. Sorry about that. I had to get my Android to work with this.
Hey man, no worries. Don't worry about it. Like we got you here. It's all good. It's all good.
I got like 3 minutes notice. I had to set up Twitter Spaces. I'm like, well, damn.
Is this first time using Twitter Spaces?
Oh yeah, we use our own equipment for our podcast and everything.
Cool. Yeah. I'm always like out and about and moving, so it's kind of easy for me to get discussions like this. But in the future, man, if we can do more of this kind of thing, right? We can maybe set up a more plausible format that would be good.
Yeah, that's fine. That works for me.
Awesome. So yeah, for all those who are listening right now, and anyone who's going to replay this back, basically the way this came about, I'm on the Betting Talk Discord, Right Angle Sports, and I noticed I think it was in the baseball chat, I noticed there was these videos that were being posted about reverse line movement, public betting percentages, and how they can be used to help handicap. And so, and the people who like are on who know me long term will know I kind of oppose that. But this is going to be good because it's hard to get guys like you, Utah, that are willing to have these conversations, because I just want good faith conversation, but everyone seems to run scared. And it would be,
No, it's fine.
it would be good to debate this, and I would love to sort of get your view on everything. But before we get going, do you want to introduce who you guys are and what you do?
Yeah, that's fine. My name's my friends call me Utah. My name's Gary, but everybody calls me by Utah, as you probably figured out, right? I'm one of the founders of Bet Gadget. We're basically kind of technologist nerds that do tech startups, and I've been betting I'm 51 years old. I've been betting for like 30 years, and been very successful at it, just kind of doing it for fun. And actually what we decided to do in February is build a tool, and we wanted to build a community where people could build models and share models and collaborate. And you're kind of seeing the prototype of what we've been doing. And we have a marketing person that goes out and, lets the world know that what we're trying to do to build that community. So it's just kind of a thing we're doing really as a kind of a hobby to start, but we see a lot of value and we're going to raise the money and make it something much bigger. So we're excited to talk to you. I've heard great things about you, actually. So excited
Nice.
about the conversation.
No, I appreciate that. Yeah, I'm sort of on the younger side. I'm 33, but I've been betting professionally for over a decade now. Pretty well respected as a pro bettor. Sell picks with Doc Sports as well, as part of like side stuff with handicapping. But those who know me know why I sell picks. There's a whole thing on that. I did a podcast a while back about that. But yeah, so I mean, it's great. Whether I agree with everything that everyone does or different points of view, I still think it's great to have what you guys are doing in this space. So I want to preface this conversation by saying that I think anytime there's more minds thinking and intelligent brains discussing these topics, I just think it's just great all around for everyone listening to decide what they think's the correct path. Right? There's more than one way to skin a cat, so why not have these
Absolutely.
discussions?
Absolutely. I totally agree with you.
Yeah. So, I mean, in your own words, I don't want this to come across like I'm interviewing you. That we'll have this. But in your own words, like, what do you think? I guess Let's start here. What would you define reverse line movement as? And do you have any specific parameters that you believe have to be met for something to officially be, say, classed as reverse line movement?
It's a little bit of a hard thing to answer because, as you know, honestly, a line can open up and 10 minutes later move the wrong direction, and people would say technically that's reverse line movement, but in 10 minutes, the amount of money it's been bet doesn't really count to make the line really truly move, right?
Hmm.
But I guess the pure definition is basically when less than 50% of the split is betting on one side and the line goes kind of the opposite direction of what it should. 60-70% of people bet on a game it's -3 and it goes to -4. That's forward line movement. You know that, right? That's
Yep.
very standard. It's what you expect to see. But when you have 70% on a football game at -3 and it goes to -2, that's reverse line movement. It's kind of when it happens is kind of the bigger point. Like I said, if a line opens at 3 and goes to 2 in the first 15 minutes on the sports book, that's just kind of correcting the line. As far as I'm concerned, it's not a real reverse line movement.
Sure. Yeah. No, I understand. And this is where I guess we can get into our first debate about one point you said, which is where I kind of push back on this, is that you mentioned, we all would expect a line to move if you say the money or the split is one way.
Mhm.
Now, so in your opinion, before I give you sort of what I think about that, just to clarify, do you think that it's money and public betting percentages that are moving lines?
I largely the way I do the analytics, it's based on the split, the betting percentage for sure. That's how I read it, based on the analytics and the tools that we use. Yeah.
Okay. No, that's interesting because basically, so here's my 2 cents on that. The way I see it is, first of all, the sharp betters is what moves the market, and the reason I have many amount of evidence for this is I can bet hypothetically. There was a perfect example actually last season. I was betting early morning college basketball at places like Pinnacle and some market setting books, whether that be Circa or Pinnacle.
Mhm.
And even if I was getting down $500, the moment I bet, the line would move a point and a half, even with $500 bet. Now I
Yep.
know guys who are squares that they could bet 5,000 and the line doesn't shift. So in that
Right.
instance, why would you say that happens? Because that's like that's a factual thing that's happening. So what would be your take on that?
I'd say it's because the handle's so small at that point, you're moving the line, wouldn't you say?
No, no, because as an example, if the public are on one side, right, and the
Mhm.
line goes that way, you think that's just because the public percentages. What if sharps agree with the public?
Well, I think what you're saying is basically if the line's 60% on one side, and that's the public, but the line moves a couple points, the sharps are probably on the same side as the public to move the line 2 points, right?
Right, right, 100%. And that's the thing. Like, so yes, in that case, 100%. Now, all I know is the way that, for example, I think you would agree, apart from a cent or two here and there,
Hmm.
the general market isn't you're not finding tons of arbitrage opportunities, correct? Like we're not seeing a -7 somewhere and then a -10 somewhere else, and it's not just sitting there all day, right? Now
No, I don't
the
see that.
reason for that is basically because there is market setting books, right? Circa, Pinnacle, Bookmaker, Chris, their credit shop, Sports 411. Now if it was strictly on public betting percentages, wouldn't we expect to see less uniform across the market?
Yeah, I would think so.
And exactly, and that's where my first issue with that remains, right? Like, um, why are we not seeing, say, a -7 here and a -8 here and a -9 there and a -6 here? Because if sports books were just managing based on liability, wouldn't we see that? And because we're not seeing that, why would you say that is?
It's the way the analytical tools read the lines. I sent you kind of a breakdown of the analytics, right? Just because
Mhm,
that we basically are largely looking at the split, and there's exceptions. There's light line movement. It also kind of validates it, typically because there's more handle or more money on the game, right? But it's really just the splitting percentage is like the easiest way to identify it to kind of break it down. Excuse me. And so that's kind of where we start. But again, like I said, it depends on the time of the line movement. It depends also on the amount of the spread too, right? I never consider reverse line movement at 40 to 50% of the split, right? Because that's too close to 50%.
mhm.
You get down to 20 to 30% of the split, it feels much more like that's really the sharps pushing the line the wrong direction to me.
Right, you mean like head fakes?
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah, that happens for sure, especially with early market moves. Um, just slightly pivoting, because I always wondered this. Do you think that sports books just so I understand your full stance on this, in your opinion, do you think sports books want to get ideally a 50-50 split, or do you think they don't really care?
People always say it's supposed to be 50-50, but I personally don't believe that. I believe that they actually hedge one side over the other a little bit. I don't know how much, but I don't really believe it's truly 50-50. What do you
Yeah,
think?
no, no, I totally agree with you, and that's good. The way I see it is this: I think way back that might have been, we're talking 20 years ago, maybe that was somewhat the idea, but I think when it comes to that 50-50 goal, it's just great in theory, but it just can't work because imagine in theory you could even get 50-50, right? What happens if 2 minutes to post you get a sharp group come in and just blitz the market 500K across? Like you all of a sudden have liability you can't manage, right? So
That's
why
right.
it's just an implausible theory, really, I think, in reality.
I love you bring this up because I've had this debate a lot, and I have people that tell me it's always 50-50. They're making money on the juice. It's always 50-50. I'm like, there's no way. There's no
No,
way that's the case.
no, no. I can tell you firsthand. I have a story. I won't name the book where they would release lines early to a few groups, including some guys I worked with. So they already would let us bet into it to get an idea of an accurate price before they opened, right? Because
Hmm.
then they don't really care where the action comes. They're like, they can, as you say, hedge ever so slightly, and they're okay taking. I mean, look, with Vegas books, I can't remember the report, but I read something not that long ago, right? That I don't think they had a losing month in even Vegas for like 4 years or something crazy. So it's like they can manage that liability, right? They don't care if they are wrong on one game. I mean they're not in the business of hedging their bets. They're in the money making business. And
Right.
if they know what a line should be, why would they don't care about that 50-50 split. So yeah, no, that's a good thing. Now, what's your opinion on when it comes to that kind of in the same vein that actually, let's go to this. When you say your public betting splits, if you can't give the names of the books, I understand, but how many sources are these coming from? Like, where are these splits and numbers you're getting coming from?
That's a really good question. If you go to our tool, actually, you'll see there's a pull down on the modeling where you can pull from about, I think there's 6 or 7 different books.
Okay.
I typically only use like two. Our tool actually goes through an API and pulls a lot of data, which you'd expect, right? Being I don't know much about tech, but it's just kind of a way to integrate and pull data kind of
Yeah.
automatically. We also do pull some data from the public domain, which is basically the internet, to scrub and to understand kind of other data points, so we get a larger kind of sample size. But for me personally, I pretty much stick to the big two, which is FanDuel and DraftKings, because I feel like those have the most money and the probably the most handle to really kind of evaluate the numbers.
Okay, so that's a good point. So you say DraftKings is one. Let me ask you this: I'm not allowed to bet more than $50 at DraftKings, but I know guys can bet 500,000. So to that point, why does the split at DraftKings matter? Because DraftKings aren't moving the line first, and the market isn't following them. DraftKings are likely following the rest of the market, right? So, yeah, to your point, let's say 70% of the money is on a team at -3, and the
Mhm.
line dips to -2.5. But the line moved at Circa first, then Penny, then Chris, and then DK followed. Why does
Mhm.
that mean anything?
It's actually comes back to the model, that the analytics I sent you an email, right? Because
Hmm.
everything, if you look at the spreads, if you looked at that, I'm sure you probably did look at it, right?
Yep. Yep.
The spreads, actually, you can't really argue the last 3 months of baseball. That this is all DraftKings, by the way, right? I was
Yep.
using their data, and it basically, it doesn't matter if you do a 30-day, a 60-day, or a 90-day snapshot. I mean, it was 10 units after a month betting every game. It was,
Yep.
11, which was not a big incremental difference. If you and I have to bet and make 1 unit in a month, we're probably going to be doing something different. But
Hmm.
you get the point. So I find a sports book. I kind of drill into the analytics. I get comfortable with the numbers, and I kind of just basically keep drilling into it. And if you get different sports books, I guess you're getting a better sample size, and maybe that's something we're going to do. We have a lot of really cool ideas to kind of expand our modeling across multiple models to build super models. But
Awesome.
yeah,
Yeah.
so you kind of see where I'm going with that, right?
Yeah, and it's good you brought up sample size because I'm actually looking at what you sent over right now just to get garner that like the information here. I mean, sample size here. What do we have across the money line spread and totals? We're looking at maybe what 200 wages here about.
Yeah, I believe so. If you look at the 90-day window on some of these games, it's what, 119 and 104. That's about
Yeah,
223.
yeah,
And then if you go to the money line, which obviously is the biggest sample size, you're at 284. So yeah, that's 284 games over 90 days.
sure. And is this data just out of interest? Because I'm just unsure from the sheet. Is the data somewhat? Is this using the line where it moved or the line where it closed, or what line are you using to determine the units?
It's interesting you say that, because on the spreads, actually, what the tool did is it basically looked for every single baseball game where a team was started off as 1.5. Actually, it'd say +1.5 and ended up -1.5. You know how the baseball spread will flip
Yep.
from one team to the other? That's all this is in that top model,
Okay.
which is really interesting to me because you can see all the green in that top part. It's pretty phenomenal. But whereas you get to the over unders and the money line, it's 50-50 probably at best.
Yeah, and with that, that's what I was getting at. So if we look at the money line, right, you have the with the reverse line movement for money lines, you have the record at 134, 150, 47%, 1.3 units. Obviously, I'm assuming because mainly underdogs.
Yeah. Yeah.
In that situation, though, with those plus 1.3 units, are you? Let's say a team goes from plus 150 to plus 120, right? Are you using the plus 150 for those units or the plus 120?
I'm using the plus 120, the end number. The end number is what we're using.
Good. No, no, that makes sense. And what the closing number or?
The closing number, the line when a line closed, that's what we have. Yeah.
Okay. No, 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 that makes sense. Sure. So in reality, if you timed the market or depending when you got in, it could be better or worse, right? Depending on that timing.
Exactly. Matter of fact, actually, our tool actually tracks units, because I was doing reverse line movement for 30 days a couple of days ago, just looking at like dogs in baseball, and it was like 44% was still plus units. I was like, wow,
Right.
44% on dogs is making money. I would have never guessed that, before I used the tool.
Yeah. One thing I will say, just on this. Now, I'm a huge fan. I actually build predictive models. I have some very, very in-depth models that basically project out outcomes of games with a less, you know, less error than the Vegas line and a better error than the closing Vegas line as well. So I'm very familiar with predictive modeling and sample sizing and how much goes into it. Now, the only thing I would say is I know that this season specifically has been a very good dog season in baseball. I mean, that's just you can chalk that up to variance to an extent. So
Hmm.
anything looking generally at dogs, and if the lines are moving even in dog favor, it's been a good year regardless. However, one thing I will say, from pretty much any extensive research I've done on this, I don't think you can really draw any conclusion from a data set unless you have at least, I'm going to say 2,000, but there's a lot of people out there in data science that believe 5,000. So, I mean,
Hmm.
that's the only, when it comes to these types of things, it looks great on paper, but then I obviously push back on, like, I mean, in reality, that is a tiny sample size. I mean, to be up
Yeah,
1.3 units on that, you could go another 200 games and be down 30 units, right? So,
I
um,
totally agree with you.
yeah, and I think that's really important. And on the taking the closing number, I did want to touch on this. Do you believe, as part of the approach of reverse line movement and the importance of it in your mind, do you think that you would generally advise people, or not advise people, but tell them to look at the team that may have gone from, let's say football, a team's, I don't know, +6, and 80% of the money is on the -6, right? And then they
Hmm.
drop to say +4.5. Is that somewhere that you think in your approach that, oh, okay, I want to take a look at that +4.5 because why did that move?
It's definitely something that gets my attention. But here's really the most important point for me is I don't use reverse line movement to bet. I use it as a kind of a data point within my kind of modeling and decisioning. But
Hmm.
you're right. It does get my attention. Matter of fact, if you look at our tool and go to NFL, you'll see we put a flame on the reverse live movement games before they start so people can just identify them. We're not saying, hey, the flame means go bet it because it's a hot bet, right? It's more just because it's kind of counterintuitive to kind of identify reverse line movement for an average better, right?
Yeah.
So we kind of make it so they can understand it and see it because it's just not something people are going to pick up in 5 minutes typically.
Yeah, sure. No, I understand. Because I mean, I don't doubt. Here's my. I'll give you my basically overview of line movement. I think all line movement is important. But not to do with the public. That's kind of where I stand on it. Like, I don't care if it's 90% on the public or on a side, or 10%. Like, where the line's moving is all I care about, based on sort of what's happening, or how I believe markets move.
Hmm.
So I don't discount somewhat, I guess, your approach. It's just more the I just discount the reverse line movement, like the contrarian or against the public sentiment, because the reason I don't like it, I feel like it encourages too many people to think that they can bet a number after it's moved. Now, as you know, each half point is worth something, hence why you have to buy points, right? If you want to buy.
That's right.
And
Right.
I mean, this is the way I always look at it. I know a very, very sharp NFL betting group that bet very, very high limits. We're talking 100,000, 200,000, right?
Right.
Per side. And they hit 55% long term over a long, long sample size, right? And that's up there is about as good as it gets. And the reason I think that's important for anyone listening to this down the road or right now to understand is, if we just assume, let's say that the +6 example I gave, if that moves to 4.5 and you think I'm going to go bet that 4.5, you have to understand that you're losing the value there. So if that group's betting at that +6 and they win 55%, the
Hmm.
fair move from 6 to 4.5 is somewhere in the region of about a 4% win probability. If we assume that +6 is -10 in market and we remove the VIG, that 6 to 4.5 is somewhere in the region of -117, -118, which equates
Yeah.
to about a 3.9% win. Now, the problem is, the very few occasions that's going to land 5 or 6 is the difference, because if you take that win probability away, you're betting that 4.5, but you're winning 51% of the time long term, and you're losing money to the VIG, while that sharp group is cashing at the 6 at 55, right? And I
Yeah.
think that's why it's so vital, and that's why I'm not a fan of looking into line movement. I prefer to get ahead of the line movement. Like, I want to bet that 6, and then I want to see the
Hmm.
market at 4. I don't want to see it. Like, if I like that team at 6 and I see it now at 4, I'm probably just not going to bet it, because the chance
That
that market, that in the NFL as well, such an efficient market, to think a line could be off by 9, 10% is a stretch to that's why I think chasing numbers is just always a bad strategy.
actually what I do, honestly, I make a lot of my money of actually live betting, looking for the value.
Right.
Chiefs game against Detroit week one. Chiefs were what minus plus or -6.5. Detroit was getting 6.5. I went to the game actually. I live in Kansas City, right? So I
Nice.
wanted Detroit. I loved the Detroit number at 6.5. It dropped to what 4.
Yeah.
I was not happy. I knew I wasn't going to bet it at 4. I waited for the third quarter. I was watching it with some friends. The game went to 7.5. I got my value. I won my
Right.
bet, which they won at 4 anyway. But you get the point. I was looking for the right number because I don't chase the line typically. I do
Yeah.
chase it occasionally when I really believe in the bet and it backfires. I'll even make your point for you. I was betting on Atlanta week 2, right? Atlanta was off as I think it was a 1 point dog. And by the time the line closed at noon on Sunday, they were -3. And guess
Mhm.
what? I love betting against betting with the plus ones, the plus twos. You know, the plus one, plus twos are really the favorites a lot of the time, right?
Right.
And so what I did is I basically wanted the plus one, went up to -3. I still bet Atlanta. And guess what? They won the game. I didn't win the bet. To your point, because I didn't get on the line soon enough.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's
So
such
wait,
an
so wait.
important point. Yeah.
Yeah, waiting does not pay necessarily every time. Sometimes it pays off, but a lot of time, no.
Yeah, and I think that's the key, and I think that's the one thing that I think triggers me in the general. Like, are you familiar with the product? I'm not a fan of theirs, but Sports Insights and that whole operation.
I've heard of them. I don't really look at a lot of those other technologies because when you're kind of building a tech company, when you start to look at things, you start to take on their personality or their tech. And I kind of try to keep our stuff
Right.
clean. And you know what I'm saying?
Yep.
You're more creative when you have a kind of a green field in your mind. So I don't really look at a lot of competing kind of tools or tech, honestly.
No, no, that's fair enough. And the reason I bring them up is they kind of were the, I guess, the godfathers of public reverse line movement to an extent. They obviously didn't invent it, but this is a company that have been around for so long, and they've kind of fallen in the gutter now. I wouldn't recommend anyone use them. They're terrible. Their data feeds they're all off. Even their live odds screens off. But regardless, um, they it's always kind of triggered me because their whole thing was, you know, let's baseball example. Oh, this team's plus 150. They're getting 80% of the bets. Sorry, they're getting 20% of the bets. They're now plus 120. Oh, we know where the sharps are at. Bet that plus 120. It's just there's just too much of a level of naivety to that I think you're missing. You're missing the point of they didn't bet plus 120. They bet plus 150. And who says they bet plus 150? Who says that isn't a setup and they're betting off screen at PPH spots, right? Not like they're using the screen to set things up to come in later, right at post where you don't even know what they're betting.
Yeah.
Um, and
Yeah.
and all that, it's a maze, man. And I think you can't just look at a few feeds from Square Sportsbooks. Let's put it that way to say,
Mhm.
oh, the money's here, the sharps must be here because they don't even take sharp bets. So like
Yeah.
DraftKings is an example, they aren't getting any sharp bets. So where they move the number, regardless of public, is irrelevant. No.
Yeah, yeah, you're probably right. Actually, I'm with you. Actually, I'm just as excited about a forward line movement if I see, the splits at like 40-60 or 55-45, and I see it go from like a -5 to a -7. That's still a significant line movement. But at the same point, you got to understand that you've just lost 2 points, right? So
Right.
these are just data points, honestly. What I like to do, honestly, my friend, is I like to do the whole entire analytical model and kind of predictive modeling I do. And reverse line movement or forward is just a component of that. But what I'll do is I've actually in baseball gotten very good at is betting dogs. And when I find a dog when the splits in 20 to 30%, I see reverse line movement early in the morning before the line starts shifting. And I've done really well at that. So there's certain things that I do. It's almost like a process. When I find a process that's somewhat repeatable across the data points, doing the predictive modeling, that's when I try to learn and repeat and grow my bankroll.
Yeah. No, no, I understand that. That makes sense. And I think, on that point there has to be everyone has to have their own way. I mean, I think, as you mentioned, you don't just use that approach as the only approach to bet because I mean, it sounds like you would agree with me, and I think it's important for people listening. And if you don't, please correct me. But I think if anyone out there thinks, I'm just going to look at public betting percentages and guess where the sharps are, and that's going to make me money, I would say with 100% certainty that will not make you money.
No, I've never made money betting reverse line movement solely. I mean, 20 years ago when I learned what it was, kind of like this company you just mentioned, it basically made that their brand, right?
Yeah.
It's a flawed approach. It's kind of fun to learn it and learn betting through these kind of terms and things like that, but it's not a way to really be profitable over time.
Yeah, yeah, totally, totally agree. And I guess I can use can do some mental maths here. I use the +6 example. Even if we use money line sports for those who are have been betting baseball lately, it's like let's give an example. Let's say team was +140, right? And they I don't know they go +125. If that team even goes 44 and 56 in 100 bets, sharp bettors are going to be up somewhere near 5.5 units. But if you're betting
Hmm.
that +125, you're actually down a unit. And you do that over 1,000 wagers, you now have a split of the sharps are up 55 units and you're down 10 units.
Hmm.
I mean, that discrepancy is huge. And that's why everyone listening, I always hear that, oh, it's only a half point, or yeah, you bet plus 110, but I like it minus 105 still. Like it's a big, it's not the same bet, right?
No, no,
It's,
it's about value. It's like buying a stock or something. You got to find value in your bets. That's the fundamentally the most important thing in sports betting is finding value. That's why I love live betting because it fluctuates so much. If you're
yeah.
patient, you can buy tremendous value.
Yeah, like that's a great topic for another time. I would love to get your sort of approach on live betting because I agree. I think the live betting market is highly not tapped into enough yet. I have my issues because limits are kind of low in general. But I don't disagree with you that live betting definitely has its place. My only thing on live betting is I think too many people think because they need to understand how live betting works and treat it as two separate entities. Like just because a team was +7 before the game and you can get them +14 live, that doesn't necessarily mean that's a good bet. Like, it's a new thing as the game's progressing, right? You need to understand how the game's moving and all the moving pieces to that.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, my friend. I totally agree with that. I consider people, if it goes from +7 to +14, that's a heavy tilt. You should be betting the opposite, if anything, not following the tilt.
Yeah, right. It's
Um,
just like
but
chasing,
but
right? Yeah.
but the same time, if you can get in and get +500 because you've got a dog, and all of a sudden they make a drive and tie it up, you can cash back out on DraftKings and
Yes.
things. You can do that. So there are
Yeah.
ways to get in and get out quickly and make your money.
For sure. And I actually good point you brought that up. We won't get into too many different topics to go off track, but cash out's great if you have that opportunity. I had that opportunity for a little while at some sports book before they politely told me to like fuck off. But those yeah, those sports books they're great because you can essentially some sportsbook will let you cash out like completely free. As long as the line hasn't moved, they don't even
Mhm.
charge you for cashing out. There are some books out there that do that, and it's
Yeah.
funny because you can just bet both sides, and if you're quick enough, wait for a market steam at circa penny or whatever, and then just cash out the one where you got the bad number before that book moves, and you basically lock in like free value. But anyone listening, don't expect that to last longer than like 2 days before they kick you out. But it works.
Actually, let me jump in on that because we actually build a kind of a function like where we got emails. So basically, across those 7 different sports books, we had the tool set up at one point where it basically email if there was 2 different sports books or betting the same game, but had like one side of the bet like +105 on one side and +105 on the other team. That basically you could basically make money in the middle. We would get those emails, but what happened is I would basically go to the sports book and they'd be gone before I'd ever get the bet in.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's a cool concept. It's really super hard to do.
Yeah, for sure. All right, before we wrap this up, I guess, can I ask you just one more question back to the public betting centers I just thought about? What's your thoughts on sort of player profiling? Do you believe that exists? I guess, do you believe it exists? I kind of know it exists based on just how they treat different players, but what's your thoughts on that? Meaning, um, let's say, give you an example I gave earlier. If I walk up to the counter at Circa and bet something, they will move it, but then someone else might bet it as well and they won't move it. Do you think that happens? And if you do like, what's your opinion on that entire thing?
I'm not sure I really have an opinion on that. Actually, I haven't really been exposed to it personally enough to really have an opinion.
Okay.
It's just
Okay.
maybe you should tell me what your opinion is. I'd love to hear your opinion on that.
Yeah, so I think the way I've noticed this works because they've got very accurate with how they move the line based on what I bet now is that they have algorithms built in where long term they kind of figure out how much you're beating the line by, where your
Hmm.
kind of return on investment sits over a large enough sample size, and they kind of extrapolate that out. And what they kind of do is assume what you think the line is, and they then balance that opinion weighted with other sharp bettors at their sports book. So, if I go in and bet use the exact same example. I go in and bet a +6, and they also had someone earlier in the week who they think sharper than me that bet +7, and they thought the line should be, +4 based on that. They nudged it down. Then I come in and bet the 6. That's just double confirmation. Then they might steam that very heavily. But if that sharper guy, bet earlier in the week a -5, and I come in and bet +6, maybe they don't move the line because they're like, yeah, okay, we might shift it a half point and we respect August's opinion, but we have someone even sharper that took a pop at -5, and we're gonna keep this number where it is. And that seems to be how they're managing those situations. And that's, I guess, my entire backfire against that's my closing, I guess,
Hmm.
opinion against why line movement doesn't necessarily mean much. That you're looking at the market following sports books. That's what tends to happen. You're getting FanDuel, DraftKings, all these places. If Pinnacle, Circa, and Chris all move from 6 to 4,
Hmm.
I guarantee the market's moving from 6 to 4. It's not because they're taking bets. They're
Right.
moving because the market's moving. That's why you look at some of. Are you familiar with a guy named Spanky and that type of operation?
No, I don't really follow the professional bettors. No offense. I just
Okay, yeah,
honestly have really, I don't follow them. I had a bad experience 20 years ago. I got one of the guys that kind of did the, let me give you a pick and you pay me for it. And if you lose, you don't have to pay for it kind of thing. And I
right.
just had left a bad taste in my mouth. And I just learned on my own over time, built the
No, fair
tools.
enough. Fair enough. There is, it's funny because I'm in that world, and I totally agree with you. There is so many snakes. There's so much bullshit out here when it comes to that stuff, pick selling particularly.
Mhm.
In the sense that to clear my name of even that entirely, people, I've got a good following now for this reason. I'm fully transparent with everything. I track everything third party, which can't be deleted or edited on a site called BetStamp. So everything that I ever bet can't even be deleted. My account can't be deleted. None of my plays can be edited. They're locked the moment you put them in.
Wow.
And that shows, that clears me in every way. So, like that. No one does that though, and there's a reason for that. You had a bad experience, and it's pretty obvious why most people don't do what I do in that instance, because
Yeah.
I'm assuming they lose, right? I mean, that's just the truth.
There's a lot of fakes out there, but I mean, I did my research on you. You're pretty amazing at your numbers. I read your profile. I was really impressed with it. So it's really a
Awesome.
pleasure.
No, I appreciate that, man. That's great. And this conversation, I really appreciate you having this chat with me, because I don't know what it is. Everyone's terrified about it, and why. I'm not out here. I'm not trying to lure you into some snake pit, or fuck you over. Like, I just want to. I think it's healthy for people to listen to this and think, that's interesting what August says. That's interesting what Utah says. You might get many people think I'm full of shit and think what Utah's saying resonates with me, and I'm gonna go that approach. And if they want to go that route, then more power to them. That's fine. It's great to have
Actually,
these chats, right?
it's actually the opposite. Actually, on our Discord today, I had a couple of the users on our Discord actually talking really highly of you and said you were really credible and said a lot of good things about you. So
Awesome.
kudos to you for building that reputation.
No, I appreciate that, man. That's good to know. Um, I try and do my best out here. I think we all are, and I think everyone should try and be aware of. There's too many snakes out there, and I don't like it. I don't. It's a shame the industry's gone that way, and everyone just needs to do their due diligence. And respect to you as well, man, for having this conversation. And at least, as you said, you had a bad experience in the past, and you tried to make your own way with this. And
It
yeah,
was it was
best
it
of
was
luck.
20, 25 years ago, so it's a not a big deal. Let me ask you one really quick question before you wrap. I want to ask you one really quick question. What is your best sport or your favorite sport to bet? I'm really curious what you really kind of feel like you thrive on the most.
Yeah, so it's changed over time. It used to be for a long time the UFC. I'm still not sure moving forward if that's the case. I find it a very soft market. I find the great thing about the UFC is you can't really build algorithms and models, right? It's going to be
Mhm.
opinion versus opinion, which always can give you an upper hand, because if your opinion's more accurate, then you're going to win. Whereas if you're trying to compete in something with as much liquidity as the NFL, you're running into the sharpest minds in the world with the most, like the best betters in the world is a shark tank, right? Although I would say these days, the last couple of seasons, it is without a doubt in college football. I was talking before you guys hopped on here about that, and since I joined Doc Sports, for example, my college football picks alone, they're up just shy of 135 units. They're 133.7 units in college football, and that's in just 2 years.
Wow,
Um, yeah, coming off a 12-3 week last week, which was nice.
I saw that.
Yeah, so I mean, uh, I would say right now college football, although college basketball last season was insane. It was for one season we did over 130 units just in college basketball. I just think any sports, like college sports, I think is probably my best in general, and then something like the UFC, anything where you can clearly gain an edge. College sports, there's so many teams, there's so many numbers you can pick off, there's so many derivatives that you can look into, that it's easier to gain an edge. And the UFC's opinion, where you try and bet into the NBA, you try and bet into Major League Baseball, and you have sometimes 5 games on the day where they have the most liquidity. I mean,
Mhm.
good luck long term. I mean, people do it. Baseball has been the only sport which has been a fucking nightmare for me. This season wasn't too bad. It is still actually slightly negative, but that's just full transparency. Baseball for me is just, I don't know what the fuck. All our models back test so great, and we fix them up. And for some
Yeah,
reason, it's just rough, man. But we originate. We're trying to. I think baseball's a tough one to originate, in my opinion. I think looking at the market and picking off weak numbers and spots is more of a better way to go with baseball. I don't know if you would agree with that.
I've never really bet baseball until this year, but building the tool and being one of the founders, I had to do it. And I basically I started middle of June, I'm up with like 24 units, which I think is pretty good, but I'm not
Yeah, no,
betting
that
big
is
amounts
great.
on my units. But to give you a little perspective, I actually last year was up 73 units on football, which honestly, most of that, I was actually negative around Thanksgiving and still turned around and went pretty big.
Nice.
But football, NFL is really what I know the best and I feel most comfortable with. And I love football. So it's a passion too, right? That's a big
Yeah.
part of data and just knowing the teams and everything else that comes with it.
Yeah, agreed. And football for me has been great too. I think um, I still find the best approach to the NFL teasers in the right spots. But this is we can maybe have a whole football discussion next time if you like, rather than going into a whole new thing now. But maybe we could do this again soon. Maybe even a
Yeah.
different format, and we can talk football if you like.
We do a weekly show on Wednesdays as well. So, I mean, we didn't do it
Cool.
tonight because we're on your show, but you're more than welcome to join us sometime. I'd love to ask you some questions and
Yeah.
pick your mind and learn some things.
Yeah, no, that would be great. Once we're wrapped up here, maybe just either you or your partner or business partner just send me a message, and we'll try and maybe get something down in schedule for that.
Sounds great.
Awesome. I guess so. Yeah. So if anyone, thank everyone for listening, who's listening, and anyone who's going to listen to this down the road. That's appreciate the listen. And do you want to say any closing thoughts here, Utah, before we wrap this up?
No, man, it's just a pleasure to meet you. Looking forward to talking to you, I'm sure, in the future. And go Chiefs.
Yes, sir. Go Chiefs. I'm okay with that. I took the money line over Jacksonville, so I didn't even lay the number, but either way, it didn't matter. So I was happy.
That's awesome.
All right,
Congratulations.
guys. Thank you for listening. Utah, pleasure, my friend.
Yep. Cheers.
All right, later.